Hello guys, in this video I'm going to be building this Sauber C22 from Revell. This is one of a batch of F1 kits that Revell released from the sort of mid to late 2000s. If you've been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I already built the Jordan 197 and the Jordan EJ10, and they're actually not bad kits. Their details are kind of simplified compared to Tamiya kits. They're a bit smaller of course because they're 1/24 scale. But the subjects they cover are quite hard to find elsewhere, and certainly this is the most economical way to find these subjects. In addition to the two Jordans, I've also built the Mercedes W01, although I didn't do a video on that on my channel, but here's a quick peek at that now. And in addition to this kit, I've also got the Renault R23 from the 2003 Formula 1 season, and the McLaren MP425 from the 2010 F1 season, still to build. Before we carry on though, a little bit of history about the Sauber C22. Powered by a Ferrari engine, this was Sauber's entry for the 2003 Formula 1 season, and the drivers were Nick Heidfeld and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. The season was a moderate success for Sauber, although reliability became more of an issue during the later stages of the season, and the team only scored one podium place all season in the US Grand Prix at Indianapolis, where Frentzen finished third. And in fact that third place would be the final podium finish of Frentzen's career. I'm jumping in midway through the construction here because I initially started building this kit when I first came back to the UK. I didn't have my lights or my camera or anything set up then, so I just started building this for myself. But then the project somehow got put to the side, and here I am 2 years later, finishing it off as part of my New Year clear out. So you can see I've got the main sub-assemblies here, off the sprues. It tends to be with a lot of F1 car kits that semi-gloss black is where you want to go for a lot of sub-assemblies. And then we've got this single piece bodywork here, which I've primed in light grey primer, followed by Tamiya white primer on top. As I say, fairly simple kits, a small amount of engine detail, but being a single piece body, which most of these Revell kits are, you can't really remove the cowling to reveal the engine. One of the biggest problems I had was trying to find a decent colour match for the Sauber. Initially I tried Tamiya TS51, which is their racing blue, but it doesn't quite look right to me. It's too dark, and it's also got a kind of metallic-y finish, which I don't think the real Saubers had. I think this would be better for maybe a later car like a Toro Rosso or a Red Bull, but just not really, it didn't really suit this car. The other issue that I had with the Tamiya spray paints is that it's very hard to get into small areas like the panel lines. And you can see here on the top of the car that white primer is showing through. And of course if you go too heavy with the spray paint you end up with big runs down the side of it. So I very quickly gave up that idea. I then looked at my acrylic paints, but the only blues that Tamiya really do are the XF8 and the X4, which is the matte and gloss version of the same colour. I did put a layer of that down, but as you can see here from the top, it lacks that saturation to be the right colour. I know there are match paints from companies like Zero Paints, but I didn't really want to spend that much on a bottle of paint that I'm only going to use once really. Instead, after a bit more research, I settled on this Tamiya Brilliant Blue, which is TS44. Again, colour, not the perfect colour, but I think for this quick build, which is what I was trying to achieve, I think it's a reasonable match. And I had a can in the garage with no plans to use it for anything else. If we look at the reference photos of the C22, you'll see that we've got this sort of cyan green blue kind of colour on the front wing end plates, on the side pods, on the side and the top, and on the aerodynamic devices coming out of the side pods. Slightly frustratingly, we only get the decals for the sides of the side pods and the top of the side pods. That's quite annoying because it basically means the builder's got to match their own paint to that decal colour. And I just felt that would be quite difficult, especially for the bit which runs off the side pod there. It's clearly going to be a different colour paint. So again, in the spirit of just getting something built rather than this languish on the shelf forever, I decided the end plates of the front wing and those aero devices are going to be the main body colour. Not 100% accurate, but I'm okay with that. Luckily the barge boards were much easier to paint, a standard yellow colour, XF3, and at this point I also painted the wing mirrors as yellow, and that commits me to doing Heinz-Harald Frentzen's car. If I was doing Nick Heidfeld's, those wing mirrors would need to be red. Before anything could be put together, I had to paint the inside of the bodywork. Various parts of the inside can be seen via the cockpit, via the air intakes from the radiators, and via the rear through the rear suspension. So it's always best to paint this with black, and I use Vallejo model colour to do that. There's also this exhaust section on the upper part of the rear bodywork, which needs to be black too. Revell supply us a basic engine plus some exhausts which attach to the engine, which is all a bit strange really because you can't really remove the bodywork and reveal the engine because the bodywork is a single piece. What it does mean, however, is it's very difficult to fit the bodywork with those exhaust pieces in place. And it's certainly very hard to get them lined up with those holes in the top of the bodywork. So I went for a simplified solution. I chopped off just the stubs of the exhaust, which is the only bit that can be seen from the outside, and I glued them directly to the bodywork like this. There we go, a mess from the inside, but looks good from the outside. We need to fit the cockpit to the upper bodywork before we can close it up, and the first piece that goes in is this piece here for the driver's windscreen. Followed by the rather basic seat. There's a nice catch here to make sure it is aligned properly. And to be honest, you could get away without gluing that in. This is also where our first application of decals come into place. And it's quite a good opportunity to try them out because as you notice here, there's little brown splodges all over my decal sheet of mould or similar. They were like that when I got it. I was a bit worried that this would cause the decals not to work properly, but as it turns out they worked perfectly well. There doesn't seem to be any discoloration of them, and you can see here we've got the various symbols in there for the electrical cut-off, the FIA approval sticker and so on. Then randomly here we have decal 43 and 44, which is two different versions of the FIA scrutineering sticker, one for each of the drivers. That's really bizarre, I've never seen that before, and I certainly can't tell the difference between these two decals, which are going to sit right down by the driver's hip in the cockpit. Very strange how Revell decided to print two versions of those. The seat doesn't include any seat belts, but we do get two decals for where the belts would go. I did consider using some Tamiya tape there for the seat belts, but I was going for a purely out-of-the-box finish. This piece isn't super well detailed to be honest, but it looks decent enough from the outside. Next up we need to fit the front suspension pieces into the nose cone. With the paint in place I found that the fit of these was snug enough not to require any glue. And that's a benefit because then you avoid the risk of damaging the paintwork with the glue. The lower front suspension piece is attached to the lower part of the nose cone. Then the bottom of the nose cone goes into the top. And we have quite a decent result there. A small gap there, but that's just because they're currently dry fitted and I need to just push the floor in a bit more. Everything then goes together. This is just dry fitting, but I will ultimately scrape the paint off those connection points and then put a small amount of cement in there. And we've got ourselves a decent looking F1 car. I put the front wing together next, and this was one of the more frustrating aspects of the kit. These things are always really fiddly, they've got very small connection points, you don't want to put huge amounts of glue on there because then it comes out and it damages the paintwork, and of course everything has to be square. So this did take a bit of time and the occasional curse word, but ultimately I had the front wing made and the rear wing made. Next up, my favourite part of any F1 build, which is adding the decals. I didn't even add a gloss coat to this vehicle first because this Tamiya paint had gone down so smoothly that I didn't feel it was necessary. I did put down some mark fit underneath the decal because I felt the surface was so glossy that the decal would just stick in position and not be able to be moved if I didn't do that. The only slight issue I had here at first, as you can see, is that this Petronas decal goes over that aero device there. Maybe I shouldn't have added that yet, but I did. So I had to just get the decal back onto the decal paper and just snip those extra couple of words off so that they would go around the aero device there. No biggie. And you can see that looks much better. I was also glad at this point to see that my choice of paint colour didn't clash with the Sauber Petronas writing on this decal, and that it is actually still visible. With any big decals like this, I always think it's useful to do both of them at the same time so you can get them nice and symmetrical. And of course the second time around I cut out that extra piece before I put the decal in the water. Bonus points to Revell here for having a little cutout in the middle of this decal for that protrusion on the nose to go through. It makes life so much easier than trying to make the decal fit around it or down over the top of it. The only decal that truly gave me any hassle was this white and green one here for the nose. It's supposed to fold around the sides of the nose and the top, but it just didn't seem to fit properly. The sort of thin tail of it there with the green at the end should be on the side of the nose, not on the top, but they're simply not wide enough to go down to the side unless you move the white right forward, and then it's in the wrong position. So that was a bit of a pain, and it never really ended up being correct. The two Red Bull logos here on either side of the airbox were also a little bit fiddly. I really needed to cover those with Tamiya mark fit. There should really be some yellow on top there as well between the decals, but it's not such a big problem because the T-cam will go there. We get regular water slide decals for the tyres as opposed to the dry transfers that we get in Tamiya kits, for example. With hindsight, I should have put the rims into the tyres first because there's bound to be some amount of flexing of that tyre as you add the rims, and that can pop those decals back off. I love watching an F1 car really turn into its final version as we add these decals. Here it is with almost all the decals added. We're simply waiting for the nose to get sorted. I need to do some white paint or something at this stage on the nose, and then there's a couple more decals that go down there on the nose too. And there we go, that is the kit complete. Let's look at some final photos. Well guys, there we go. That was my finishing off of the Revell 1/24th scale Sauber Ferrari C22. I was really pleased with the result of this. I really enjoyed building this kit, and I'm really glad that I pulled it out of the container on the shelf and decided to finish it off. To be honest, it only took me about a week to finish it, but it just took me 2 years to get the container down from the shelf. I know it's not perfect. I know it's got slightly wrong colours on those front wing end plates on the aero devices there, but it was a really fun build. And you know, despite sort of Revell kits not always advertising themselves very well, this actually went together pretty well. Yes, it's simplified. You can't remove the cowling to see the engine, but you know what? That actually makes putting the kit together a little bit easier. The decals went down very well despite being quite old and looking like they were going mouldy. And although they seemed quite thick and not super responsive to the mark set, they did go down well in the end, and they don't look thick, I don't think, once they're on top of the model. I really like the final result here. I'm so happy with it, and it has reminded me to dig out another one of these Revell kits from my stash, probably the MP425 sometime soon. I am actually in the middle of building a couple more F1 cars from Tamiya. There will be videos on these. And it is very clear just the difference in how much work it requires to build the Tamiya ones. Not because the kits are worse, but just because they've got all that extra detail on the engines and the exhaust and so on that you know you'll be able to see because you've got removable cowlings and so on. But it just has that extra sort of level of commitment when you're building them. I think on that note too, it'd be quite interesting for me to build the Arrows A17 from Studio 27. That's similar to this kit in the fact that it's a single piece bodywork, but of course we've got the multimedia, the resin, the photo etch and the white metal. So that will be an interesting experience, I think. Anyway, that's all in the slightly more distant future. Next week I will have a military subject for you. Until then, I would like to say thank you to all of you for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Well done if you got this far through the video, and until next time, have fun modelling.